People come to me all the time and they're like, oh, tell me, like, what's the secret of success? Like I have some like hack or something. It's like, there's no secret. I just do all the stuff that you're not willing to do every day. A lot of limiting beliefs are like, so one that's very common that I've dealt with a lot in my life is like, I'm not enough. Most people actually have that one if they're being honest. You're trying to like prove to the world, to prove to your family, to prove to yourself that you are enough. And so that's part of what's driving you. But if you can like accept that you are enough, then, it's hard, but life is happier.
You founded your team back in 2009, and now you're the top 3 ranked buyer's agent in San Francisco. You sold over $165 million last year, $815 million in career sales. So I was curious, how does someone from a small town in Missouri grow up from humble with little to eat, go to working with billionaires?
I remember having a very specific conversation with my mother on the way to college where I was like, you know what? I'm going to go somewhere where nobody knows me and I'm going to like rewrite my future. I'm going to decide who I want to be and I'm going to become that person. That is something to this day that I like really, really embody. Like I believe you can do whatever you want.
2 to 3 years, you put them through the ops and they have a 3-day intensive.
Generally, I will not hire an experienced agent. We do have very, very different systems. We have a very intensive hiring process. So I brought her in for a trial. We do a three-day paid trial where we kind of put them through things. Her first year in sales, she did $50 million.
Ruth, appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you joining me.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So you founded your team back in 2009, and now you're the top 5 ranked agent in SF out of 5,000 agents, the top 3 ranked buyer's agent in San Francisco. And you sold over $165 million last year, $815 million in career sales. 86% of the time you get in contract within 1 to 2 offers, and your sellers earn an average of over 8% above the list price. So I was curious, how does someone from a small town in Missouri grow up from humble with little to eat, go to working with billionaires?
Well, I don't work with a ton of billionaires, but I do work with some billionaires. There's a disproportionate amount of billionaires in San Francisco than probably anywhere else. The more shocking thing is just like kind of the everyday Joes that have hundreds of millions of dollars that you would never know it, which feels like everybody sometimes. Um, so I think that, rewinding back to like college and stuff, I went away to college. I put myself through school. I knew I didn't want to stay in a town of 12,000 people. And also, I remember having a very specific conversation with my mother on the way to college where I was like, you know what? I'm going to go somewhere where nobody knows me and I'm going to like rewrite my future. I'm going to decide who I want to be and I'm going to become that person. And that is something to this day that I like really, really embody. Like I believe you can be whatever you want. I think when I was having the 18-year-old me having that conversation, I didn't believe that as much as I do today. But having like, I used to have a thing on my wall called Today I Will. And when I'd brush my teeth, I'd read it. And it was like very aspirational of like, this is who I want to be. This is how I want to think. This is what I'm going to do. And every year I'd rewrite that. And I have to say that even as aspirational as it was, like the amount of stuff that has come true on that list, and even, you always move the bar, right, as you go.
Mm-hmm.
It just became really apparent, like, that you can be whatever you want to be. And I just learned that over time. And just really decided to like control my own life instead of like taking the life that was given to me, creating the life that I wanted to have.
Hmm. So where did that desire for that come from?
Maybe the desire not to be in like a hellhole. It was like the wanting to get out, versus the knowing, and my aspirations initially were really low. I remember one of my first like job interviews out of college for this sales job, and they asked me like, it was in San Francisco. I moved to San Francisco. I had no money, no job. I like found some random dudes on Craigslist that like allowed me to rent a room from them.
Sounds sketchy a little bit.
And I think my mom was like, "What are you doing?" But I remember they asked like, "How much money do you want to make?" And I was like, "I don't know, like $40,000." Like that was my answer, and they were like, well, the good salespeople here are making like 150, and if you're not aspiring to be good, then we don't really think we want to hire you." And I was like, "Oh, well, if the good people are making that, then I want to make 200. But I didn't know that was possible, right? Because where I came from, if you made $100,000, you were really rich. Um, and so I just didn't even like think that you could graduate college and make over six figures like your first year out of college. So, I think just, as you get more exposure to things and realize more things, then you realize like what is possible.
Yeah, and it's kind of similar in a way to we were talking about Ken Pozek before. He had that same like desire, the ambition to come to really avoid the upbringing that he was put in. Um, and I was curious because you mentioned that you wrote down a lot and you still do it to this day, everything that you want. And some people might look at that and they might say, well, does that even like work? Like the law of attraction, like it's just a bunch of like pie in the air, but you believe in it and it works and it came true. What are you writing down and why do you think it works? Or why did it work?
I think that a lot of times when you write something down, your brain unconsciously figures out how to do it. So I do believe in a lot of really fluffy stuff, actually. So one of my first coaches early in my career was an NLP coach, which I have like Tony Robbins has had like an extremely powerful influence on my life. He's also trained in NLP. Um, and my one of my limiting beliefs, which is something that is taught about in NLP, was life is difficult. And it came actually from a book that had a big influence on me, which was The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck. I read it many, many times when I was younger. And the first line of that book is life is difficult. When you realize that life is difficult, life is no longer difficult. So you're kind of just expecting life to be hard. And that belief served me really well for a long time. Like, I never thought I was the smartest person in the room. I never thought I was special. I still don't. Um, I believed that, like, I could work harder than anyone else. And, like, I will work you under the table. And I also believed, and I have seen that the majority of people are pretty darn lazy. So it's actually not that hard. Um, so the now that belief served me really, really well until I was about 30. And then I started realizing that I was like unnecessarily like making my life hard. Like it didn't
Hmm.
necessarily need to be, there got to be a point where it was like I had what I needed, but I was just always trying to create so much challenge around me all the time because I felt like that was what life is and that's what success is. And one of my coaches said, like, what if you could like make a lot of money and be really successful and it wasn't hard? And I was like, oh, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. And he's like, you don't think that there's anyone out there that makes good money and is successful and like doesn't really work that hard? Like, and personally, I think the 4 hour work week is a bunch of shit, like I was like, not really, like, and so but it planted a seed, and like I had to really work hard to change the limiting belief. But all that to say, like,
Hmm.
as NLP, what it teaches you is a lot of times like just setting intention, like your brain will figure out the rest. And for me, that was hard to believe because that's too easy, right? Like your brain can't just figure things out and work in the background on stuff because that is too easy. You have to work really, really hard. You have to kill yourself. Um,
Yep.
but I started seeing that that was true is like, a lot of times just the act of like being like, I'm going to have this time block or I'm going to do this thing, you'll suddenly start working on these smaller things without even thinking about it that gets you to that goal. But if you never set those intentions, then your brain doesn't know to start thinking about those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, and it kind of reminds me, like I was seeing a quote very recent, like Jesse Eisler talks about it. It's like the average podcast only does like one episode, and then most quit after like 12 episodes. And it's like when you realize life is hard and you're okay with that, but then you realize that most people won't even push through that hard. It kind of shows like it's a lot easier than you think. You just have to push longer and push further and harder than everyone else. And so I was curious because it kind of, in my mind, like, for example, I tell myself, like, I may not be the first one to get something, but I guarantee you, if you give me long enough, I will learn it to the best of my ability. Would that be considered like a limiting belief, saying I might not get it at first, but if I put a lot of time into it, I know I'll put a lot more time into it than everyone else. So in the long run, I will figure it out.
I don't think that's a limiting belief. I think it's a fact. So the consistency is what like people come to me all the time and they're like, "Oh, tell me like what's the secret of success?" Like, like I have some like hack or something. It's like there's no secret. I just do all the stuff that you're not willing to do every day, day in and day out. And over time I've hired people to do some of those things too. So it's like leverage, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the consistency. Like people want to pay a coach, get a plan, but they don't want to implement the plan. They don't want to like actually do the boring stuff. And they get super distracted by like the next thing. Like, they're like shiny squirrel object, right? And I'm guilty of that. I think we're all guilty of realtors are all guilty of that. It's like, oh, this lead generation thing makes a lot more money. Maybe I should drop everything I'm doing over here and focus on that. Um, so, I mean, I think you are right. Is like, I mean, a lot of limiting beliefs are like, there's really only like seven of them or something if you study this stuff. And so, like, and everybody has those seven. So, one that's very common that I've dealt with a lot in my life is like, I'm not enough. Like, right? Like, most people actually have that one if they're being honest. Like, you're trying to like prove to the world, to prove to your family, to prove to yourself that you are enough. And so that's part of what's driving you. But if you can like accept that you are enough, then, it's hard, but, life is happier if you're not constantly trying to be more, than in order to prove something, right?
Yeah, that's interesting because I look at that and I'm like, yeah, that does stem to a lot of different things. Like, how did you work through that?
Through the life is hard or I'm not enough.
Uh, the I'm not enough.
I'm not enough. I think I'm still working through, to be honest. I don't know, like that. I don't know if I'll ever like fully capture that, but I think gratitude practice is really big, right? So just like realizing that, you do have like I have more than I need, right? And I do feel like I've kind of at 44 years old, I've come to a phase in my life where I'm really grateful. But I was grateful and when I was 19 and I had nothing, right? So I just think like practicing that gratitude no matter what, I think that's really big. And like the people around you and like how they're seeing things is really important because they end up influencing you so much no matter what. And then obviously what you're putting into your mind is really, really important as well. So I try and like, I wouldn't say I read a lot, but I listen to a ton of audio, books and
Same.
podcasts and yeah. I should read more, but I'm like, oh, I read that book. No, I didn't really read it, but I listened to
Never
the whole
read a
thing.
page.
Sometimes yeah.
That's
You
funny.
can't read and walk at the same time, so
Yeah,
this is
exactly.
it's
You can't like drive your car and read or go to the gym and
right,
read.
right.
It just makes it easy.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's kind of no excuse when you have all this stuff around you. There's no excuse not to be like learning and bettering yourself because there's so much like net time where you could be doing something else and kind of multitasking and learning something at the same time.
So is gratitude a practice like that you do writing every single day?
Writing, no. But so on my team, we use this like kind of archaic app called Marco Polo. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's
I've
not the
heard
greatest
of it.
app. I'm kind of in love with it, but it needs a lot of work. So if there's any engineers out there that want a pet project, the interface is not great, but it's a fantastic app. So I have all these channels I communicate with my family on there. Keeps us super close and tight. It's just like in the moment, like this is what's going on. You can do it while you're walking. Like you don't have to wait for somebody to pick up the phone. It's just like constant communication. So my team has different channels. Like we use it for like, oh, I just had this buyer question, but it's not super urgent. So the whole team can learn at one time. We also have a channel specifically for gratitude. So everybody gets on there. It's supposed to be every day. It's not every day, but probably every other day, every third day, different people depending on what they have going on. But, and expresses like their gratitude. And I think it's been a really good core part of my team in terms of part of our culture, because it's something I really, really believe in. Like we kick off every meeting with a gratitude practice as well. And B, a lot of times people's gratitudes end up being things like, gee, I'm so thankful for my health because my best friend's in the hospital. Like it ends up being like people end up sharing a lot more about their personal life. Like often gratitude comes because you're experiencing something difficult. So it's only then, you appreciate
Yeah.
your health because you didn't have it yesterday or something like that. So people are really sharing like this is what's going on with me and it makes the team really really tight and they like really love each other and care about each other and if you're going to spend 70% of your time doing something and being around people like it's nice to love them. So yes, that's how we do gratitude.
Nice. That's actually really great because I started doing something with like Typeform where like I'll reflect on like a day or a week or a month, quarter, and I see there's probably a huge community benefit in a way to like putting that gratitude out to your team, and that's what starts to build a connection. That's really awesome. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, I like it.
So you talked about I heard you talk about you struggled early on to the point where you wrote 14 offers for one client early, but
You did
now
your research.
I try. You now you show, which is another thing which is really interesting. You're very data driven. 86% of the time you get buyers into contract within 1 to 2 offers. What was that switch?
Well, I think like a lot of realtors, I'm embarrassed to say, but like I just like was winging it in the beginning, right? It's like you get this license that has like no relevance whatsoever in terms of knowing how to sell a house. And at
Hmm.
that time, like 14 years ago, there were no teams. Like teams have only just become a thing recently. So like there wasn't an opportunity to like join a team and like learn from people and all the stuff. I actually had a mentor that I paid 30% off the top. Um, and that person, like, I mean, I used to ask them, like, can I be like on your emails or something so I can kind of see what's going on with your clients? And like, they were like, no. And I'm like, can I go to like a listing appointment with you and like see how this is or be involved in your stuff? And they're like, no, like you're paying us to like help you with stuff. So they would like, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to do a disclosure review with a client. This is how I'm going to try to review this. Does this make sense? And they would give me training, but I wasn't like getting training like on how to negotiate or anything. And like, I didn't know what I was doing. I still remember for that client, there was one time that this agent called me back and she's like, this was like 2009, 2010, something. And she goes, so if your client comes up like $5,000, then, they can get the house. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, I was like, my job is to negotiate for them. Like, this is my time to shine, you know? So I didn't even talk to the client. Like, that's like so wrong, Like, I didn't even give the client the option. I was just like, here I go. I'm like going to be a good negotiator, Like, no. And then she sold the house to someone else, like, go figure, right? Like, and I was like, I thought you'd call me or something. Like, so, I mean, I just literally did not know what I was doing. And so over time, like, I'm really reflective, really thoughtful. So, like, every time I would lose a deal, I would sit down with my broker and be like, this is what happened. How could I have done this differently? What could I learn here? And, obviously, I mean, I'm reflective, but I'm a slow learner because it took me like 5 years to really, really get traction because I didn't have that coaching that I needed. Now my team, like all my calls with clients are recorded. They listen to like exactly how I have the call. Like they can learn from all of that because of Marco Polo. We talk about deals in real time, how they happened, like how they play out. So, I just think like no, getting experience matters because every deal and knowing how are we delivering the information to the client? Like what are we queuing up for them? How are we like helping them like in that deal time situation when they need to go up and sometimes it's hundreds of thousands of dollars and they want to get in their own way? Like a lot of times your negotiation is with your own buyer. It's not with the other side, especially in a market like San Francisco where people often have to pay up because they're competing against 10 people, right? And like buyers want to draw a line in the sand and be like, no, I'm not going to get emotional about this. It's like, okay, well, I respect that, but let's talk about like what's going to happen tomorrow when we're starting over and now this is the new comp, but this house is perfect for you. Like, are you going to end up finding this house again and now it's going to cost you more? Like, that's probably what's going to happen. So, like, let's use the benefit of hindsight 2020 right now before you lose the house, because often we talk to buyers the next day that are really regretful. So let's talk through all that. Like, let's talk through what is your plan B in this situation. And like, I mean, if you can afford the house and you love the house and somebody else is going to get it instead of you, why wouldn't you buy it? Right. So I think it's really being confident in those conversations, but understanding like you're pushing them, but you're also like you have also established the rapport with them and the trust with them because of things that you've done up to that point where they know that you have their best interest at heart and you're not just trying to make a commission.
Yeah. And I don't know if you noticed this, but it just kind of like clicked in my head between like the mentors, like that part, I feel like you understand like the speed of hiring someone to learn, but I just kind of realized your open communication, the dialogue with the team, having that transparent line of communication, that's a way, it seems like it's a way to speed up the learning as well. Was that like intentional or did you notice that?
Yes, definitely. I mean, like I don't even hire, like generally I will not hire an experienced agent. I say that with quotations because like, I mean, I had someone in the last few months and she had come into the team. We were hiring for a position, like a back end position, and she had 10 years of sales experience on a big team. And I looked up her sales like under her name in MLS and she had done 60 million in 10 years. It's like a solid amount, right?
Yeah.
And had been on a busy team. And I thought she was going to like run circles around like one of the people on my team who had been on my team at the time for like a year that came from no industry knowledge. Right. And I brought her, we have a very intensive hiring process. So I brought her in for a trial. We do a three day paid trial where we kind of put them through things. And one of the exercises I had her do was running comps on this like 250 unit building, which is like, that's the easiest comp that you could ever run because there's like direct, like it's like mirror images, right? And in
Mm-hmm.
San Francisco, a lot of times comps can be really hard because you really have to extrapolate. The inventory is so different. But it doesn't get easier than a multi-unit building and a high rise. And she could not do it. And I was like, how have you ever sold a house? Like, if you cannot figure out the value of, like, what are you communicating to these buyers? And so and then I thought about it and I realized, like, okay, so with the number of transactions that she's been doing, she's done 5 deals a year for 10 years. The girl who I was comparing her to had been involved in 100 transactions in 1 year. And so, her experience, like it would have taken this girl 25 years to catch up to the girl on my team that had 1 year of experience. And that 25 years wouldn't have even been as good because it's so spread out over such a long amount of time. The market's
Yeah.
changing so much, like you just can't learn. So
Yeah.
yes, I mean, to me, like some people feel like they want to keep things a secret from different people and or not like kind of keep them down or keep them in a box. For me, like I want everybody to like know as much as possible. And I'm like open kimono. So I'm just trying to like teach them as much as I can. If they want to be better than me and leave the team, good. I mean, good. I wish that for them, right? But I mean, I'm trying to make a world that's big enough for them to be as big as they want to be in my world because they're all amazing and I really want to keep them. But, if I can't achieve that, then they should go, if they outgrow what they can get from me.
Yeah. And that's the best mindset to think of. So if you're hiring new agents, how do you, off first impressions, like what are traits that you look for that determine between the extremely successful to the unsuccessful agent?
So, so we're looking for a couple of what I would call values in order to know if they're going to be a good team fit. One is contribution. Because I start people, I don't hire new agents as agents. They have to come up to the ops. They have to learn on the back end first. So I'm not trying to like stack numbers and just, I have people who come to me all the time. I want to be an agent on your team. And I'm like, nope, it doesn't work that way. Right. So we're not trying to like have this big, massive team where we're just like, oh, I mean, I could do 500 million in sales if I took every agent, but then it wouldn't be like the Christian team way. Like I want to
Yeah.
know when somebody sells a house, it's like this is like everything is procedured and processed. And it's like my team, if you hear them on a call, they are basically mimicking exactly what I say. Like they talk exactly like me because they've listened to so many of my meetings, so many of my conversations, been involved in so many deals before they ever have the opportunity to sell a house. So, it's slower, but for me, I'm not just trying, like, I don't care about the numbers. Like, I just want to do a good job. And I
Yep.
want to know that when I promise, like, I'm referring this client to my friend's friend, that it is going to be the same way I would have sold a house. I want to believe that. And I do believe that. And the only way that's going to happen is if they work under me for like 2 or 3 years before they ever have
Wow.
the opportunity to sell a house. Yeah.
So contribution is one. Is there
Oh,
any others that are
contribution.
important?
Sorry, I got distracted.
You're good.
Contribution is one. So that's like, if there's a team, right? It's like a lot of times agents are really egotistical. So they're just like, like we had people and
Yep.
they're like, somebody who wanted to go directly into sales. And she's like, well, to work on your team, that's fine. I'll do the ops thing. But when I'm talking to her, you know, she's never mentioning like, I want to help others or it's all about her. That's not going to be a good
Mm.
fit. And then the second one that's really, really important to me is growth, like a growth mindset. So like, I mean, I was interviewing someone the other day and I asked, what have you done in the last like few years, like in order to like grow yourself as a person? And she's like, well, I'm at this big bank and like, there's so much bureaucracy and there's always things that I have to learn. And I'm like, okay, that's a lame answer. Like that's weird, yes, but like what about and I asked her, I said, well, what about you? Like what about for yourself? And she's like, well, if you're trying to lose weight. And I'm like, okay, like, well, so what are you doing to try to lose weight? So, oh, I'm trying to like eat better. And like, I'm looking for like, what programs have you enrolled in? Like, what YouTube channels are you watching? Like what's your plan, like
Yeah.
there's so much free stuff out there, like what are you doing to improve? And because also like I'm going to annoy the crap out of somebody like that because I'm going to be like, let's read this book together, we're going to have a book club, guys, and then we're all going to talk about how we're growing. And like for somebody who that's not part of who they are, they're going to be like, this is annoying, what does this have to do with real estate? But that's who I am. And so I want the team to like that too. And I do believe in order to be good at this job, you have to want to grow.
Yep.
You really have to be curious about like wanting to get better. And so to me, that's like a huge thing that I can't train either of those things. Either you are a person who wants to help others and contribute, and you are a person who has a growth mindset, or you're not. Like, I don't think you suddenly become that just because of the company that you keep.
Yeah, and the contribution speaks to the collaboration that you have with all the communication, and then the growth speaks back to your growth, everything that you do to grow. So it really stems from everything that made you, like who you are. So that's
Right.
really awesome. And so that amazes me. So 2 to 3 years, you put them through the ops, and they have a 3 day intensive. Like someone who's getting into sales, like for them to go, man, I have to go into operations for 2 to 3 years. Because the one thing that I've heard, you have a quote where it's like, uh, my client list is small, which means you have my full attention, but my team is not, which means we handle the hundreds of details in the transaction while
That's
you
good.
handle
Who
your
wrote that?
life. And
That was
I
before
actually
ChatGPT too.
I actually had a friend who mentioned that they think your processes are built different than everyone else's. And I think this is where it all kind of stems from. So I was curious, is that where it all stems from? Do you build everyone up? And then how do you, like, where do they start in the operations? Can you walk me through that a little? Because that's really
Who's your
intriguing.
friend?
He's in Compass. So
Okay.
you might or might know him.
Okay.
I'll tell you
I mean,
after.
we do have very, very different systems. Like I like operate very differently than people. So the reason, like probably if somebody is coming in where they want to be in sales, they may not decide to come to my team. Now, Lauren, who's on my team, who worked on operations for 4 years before going into sales, her mom was one of the top, or is one of the top agents in Chicago. And she's like a dream hire. Like she worked at like a McKinsey type firm, like,
Mm,
really hard to get hired at, very hard work. She's very, very smart. Um, Seriously, like one of the hardest working people I know. But when she came in, the attitude that she came in with was, so she didn't have any experience. She did want to go into sales, but she also, I don't know if you study the disc, but she's a DC, which is
oh,
very
okay.
unusual personality, but
Yep.
very amazing personality. Very driven and highly detailed at the same time. They don't usually go together.
That's very hard
Um,
to find. Yeah, both of those.
Very hard to find. But because of her C, she was like, I really want to know everything before I take on this level of commitment to helping somebody with something so important. And I remember like, when I'd be hiring someone for the role that I was hiring for at that time, like a lot of times if there was somebody like that was so smart like her and coming from this great background, and then I'd be like, well, I also want you to handle my calendar and inputting my CRM. They're like, oh, like I don't do those kind of like low level tasks. And
Hmm.
she was like, oh my God, what could be more like amazing than understanding your calendar and like what you choose to spend time on, like there's nothing more important, like so. And she felt that way about everything. She literally was like so curious about like, how did you get to be this successful? And I am so lucky to get the inside view and work on it and truly understand it before I try to go into this. Now, her first year in sales, she did $50 million.
Wow.
So now my first year in sales, I made gross $24,000. So this is the thing, is like for people who are trying to go into sales, like you're not going to make any money for years, like any. And you're going to be spinning your wheels, like not being able to figure it out. So like you come on my team, I'm going to pay you well, and you're going to learn more than you could learn in 5 years on your own in 1 year. And like the whole time you're getting paid, and you're getting like all this experience so that when you do get in front of a client, you're confident, you have the ability to sell because you have the experience. And so like it really is like, I mean, I agree with you. Most salespeople, they're just like, I can do this on my own. Like I
Yeah.
don't think you know who I am. I'm so smart. Like I'm such a good salesperson. I am not going to go through this. And most of them do, right? They do not get hired, right? Or they don't want to get hired, many of them. So you're right. A lot of the people don't, are not attracted to my team, and I'm not attracted to them. It makes hiring really hard. Finding the right
I
fit
could
is really,
imagine.
really hard. Um, so I'd say some of the people who do come in, they actually don't intend to go. Sometimes they don't intend to go into sales, but then they get so good at what they're doing and they see that opportunity that, like there's one of the women now who's been with me for like 6 years. I've been trying to push her into sales for like 4 out of the 6 years. And she's been like, no, 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 I don't want to. Finally, she's like, okay, I'm going to do it. And like, she's going to be amazing, but like, it's like if you're coming in and your eye is on sales, like I did just hire someone who seems amazing. His eye is on sales. And I was telling him, like, listen, like this is sales. Like everything that you're going to be doing is going to be building you up for sales. Like, so don't like, if you tell me in 6 months, like, oh Ruth, this has been super fun, but now I really want to be in sales, I'm be super aggravated. Like, because I'm going to be spending all this time training you. So do not come to work for me if you're going to do that. And he's committed to not doing that. So you can check back in with me on 6 months on whether or not that happened or not. But, I think it is, it takes a special person. So,
Yeah. But I think that speaks to like earlier how you sell on average 8%. Uh, each seller gets 8% higher than the average is because of that process is very regimented and you know how that flows. So I was curious that 5 years of learning that she got within 1 year, if we look at like the listing process or the client acquisition process, what are three things that someone like her will learn differently on your team that they may not get a chance to learn somewhere else?
well, I think there's going to be a couple of things. One is just going to be like how to close, right? Because they're like literally listening to me. Like, I don't have meetings in person, which is also like really weird to agents. I don't meet with a client in person unless I'm showing them a house or, I mean, having a glass of wine. Um, but like as an interview, I don't meet with you in person, right?
Yeah.
For like, there's certain steps that you have to meet in person, but I don't have time to drive everywhere and drive back and do all that stuff. If something can be done on Zoom, that was like the best gift of COVID. Thank you. And I've never gone back. And that also allows everything to be recorded. So they listen to
Mm,
everything. So getting those, like, I mean, that's the thing is like, if I knew what to say in those first 5 years, I could memorize anything. I could follow
yeah.
a template, but no one could tell me what to say. And it's very hard to know what to say until like it's even hard to repeat back the conversation because it's the nuances in real estate. It's like a lot of times if somebody calls me and said, I just had this call with this agent and they said X, Y, and Z, they probably said more than X, Y, and Z. And it was those nuanced things and the way and the intonation that there's like a language behind the language in order to understand like what was really happening there that only comes with experience. So like learning that stuff, it's like these guys are closing sales like left and right. The other thing is that we have like with buyers, like we're closing a ton of buyers right now. We've decided like last July when the market kind of blew up, we're like, okay, this listing stuff is sucks. Um, like for the first time in
Which
my
is the
career, like
opposite of what everyone wants,
that's
usually.
yeah, it's like list or die, right?
Yep.
But like the market got hit really hard first in San Francisco. So we felt it first. And I had four listings last fall that I took off the market that didn't sell. Like I spend about $4,000 to $5,000 on every listing. By the time I pay like a project manager, do all the photos, the videos, all that. So if I take four things, I just lost $20,000, right?
Yeah.
Plus, like my time that I could have been working on something else. Quite frankly, I'd rather watch paint dry than like work on something that's not going to sell. The seller hates you. Like you worked your ass off for free and they hate you. I mean, they might not hate you in all cases, but they don't love you. You're certainly not getting their firstborn child named after you. Um, so I was like, let's be the people beating up people. Let's work with buyers more. And we just started like trying to figure out how to hack things for buyers. So one of the things that we do differently on the buy side is we do this past sold exercise. I think it's really, really valuable where we like, I had a call with somebody yesterday. We did a past sold and, out of like, they look at 6 months of sold inventory. And then they told me they would only bought four of the homes. And I looked at the four homes that they said they would have bought. And I was like, actually, I think you would have bought one. And I told them, I'm like, this is a needle in the haystack search. It's not going to happen for you unless we change some things, right? Either you increase your budget, which a lot of times in San Francisco, they do have the capability to do. Like we get people to move up a lot of times $1 million, $2 million in these calls. So
Nice.
increase your budget to increase the odds that you can find what you want. We can do the exercise again. Or you decide not to be so damn picky, right? Like these people, when they showed up for the call, instead of like deciding that they wanted to be more flexible, they're like, here's the 10 more things that I added to my list of criteria. And I was like, I think you missed the idea here of what the exercise was. Like we're trying to like make it more possible for you. And finally what I told them was I was like, look, honestly, I don't think you're buying a house for your life right now. And I just don't think your life is miserable enough. Like you like your place. So you're not willing to make the compromises, but you're planning on having a baby. 2 years from now, when that baby needs more space and you need all this stuff, you're going to be ready to compromise. But I don't see it right now. So it's like, I don't really want to waste my time on that, nor do I want them wasting their time on that. I'd rather them just like enjoy your life in your high rise until you have a baby. Call me later, or get real. So I think that, I mean, I say it much, I'm not super subtle,
Yeah, you
but
don't.
I do say it nicer than what I'm saying now. Um, and people appreciate it because they're not wasting their time for years looking for something that doesn't exist. And then and we have had buyers who have been like super, super, like I'm like, this is going to take 2 years. Like it's going to take forever for you to find something. And you're probably never going to buy because you're not going to be motivated to go to open houses and stuff. And you're not going to know the right thing when you see it. But then suddenly that perfect thing comes up and they know that there was only two things that came up in 6 months and they know they're like, oh my God, we got to buy this house. We'll do whatever it takes because there's not going to be another one. And I'm like, yes, let's do it. So it just like puts them in a very different frame of understanding their own priorities and their own compromises.
This is gonna sound crazy because I think I know where you got that from, because I learned that past sold thing, and I've been telling people about that. And when me and my wife started searching back in COVID in 2020, I literally sat her down and I said, "Look, here's the area that we're searching. This is what's sold in the last 6 months. This is what we could have bought. So it's there. We just have to be patient." And I got it from Carrie Scholl, and I know you
It is Carrie
follow.
Scholl. Yes. Yes. She's a good friend of mine. Yes. Carrie taught that to me. Absolutely. She gets all the credit for that.
So is that like something? Is that one of the things that you attribute to like why you're able to get buyers to close a lot quicker? Is you get them to realize there's other
Yeah.
things on
So
top of that?
we do it different than Carrie. Like Carrie does it like in her interview. We have an interview. The client probably spends like 3 or 4 hours on the exercise because it's an exercise. They're going through it detailed. And then I spend 3 or 4 hours on it, understanding their comments. Because it's not like every market's different. San Francisco is very complex. The stuff is all very different. And there's like a ton of different neighborhoods to like understand. So it's like you got to kind of understand your own market with how to use that exercise. Um, so then we get on a call and go through all that and figure out at that moment what we can adjust. It's not like Carrie does it in like 15 minutes on the call. Like the whole time that we spend on that exercise between the client, my time, and then the follow up time, it's like 10 hours. So it's
Wow.
really time intensive. But because we sell a house first or second time, a lot of times in like the first week that they're looking, we end up shaving off like tons of time. And the client's
Hmm.
happier, we get paid faster. Like, what could be better, you know?
Yeah. So, but I could imagine like someone would say, well, what, like, first question come to mind, well, how do you even get like a buyer? Like someone comes on Zillow or you get a referral, like how do you get them to commit to 4 hours? And then on the other side, the agent might be thinking, well, what if the buyer leaves like and commit to 4 hours? What
I
would,
don't care. Then go. Get out of here. Get out of my life. Like, let's move on. We only want to work with committed buyers. So like, and we only want to work with realistic buyers. So like,
yep.
at a lot of times during that thing, it's just like, I mean, and buyers be like, oh, that's okay. Like actually, the buyers say, they're like, I have a lot of time. I was like, great. What do you think is going to be different 6 months from now? Like, this is, we can fast forward, we're going to be in the same spot. Like you're in a needle in the haystack search. You either get realistic or you're not going to buy the house. You're not going to buy a house, like this isn't going to suddenly appear because you're not going to be able to feel motivated enough to look at the one off inventory that comes up in 6 months. Like, especially when it sells in 4 days, right? You're not going to be ready
Hmm.
to do what you need to do to win.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, so that is something that's very different about me. I fire clients. Like, I basically tell clients no all the time. Like, if I'm in a listing presentation and they're like, yeah, so like, I love that you're an interior designer. I'd love to, like, work with you and collaborate and like, you can run all the lights by me and the paint colors and it'll be so fun. I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I don't work that way. Like, you move out, you hand me the keys, I let you know when the money's in the bank. Like, you're hiring me for my expertise. You're not involved in the process. I will not run lights by you. I will not run paint colors by you. You're trusting me. Like, the clients who hire me trust me to do what's right for them. And I'm not a fit for everybody. So it sounds like we might not be a good fit. And so then sometimes they'll be like, yeah, we're not a good fit. And I'm like, great, thanks for your time. Bye. And then other times they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I will not do that. I will totally get out of your way. And then the
Hmm.
control is shifted, right? Like there's a respect for like, I'm not going to pull her around like a dog with a chain and tell her how to have her process. Like I just tell people like my process is not for everyone, but I have a process. And either clients hire me for that process because they want to work that way, or they hire somebody else. There's tons of agents out there. You should find the right agent for you. This is how I work. Does that work for you?
I like that. That- it's getting them to understand like you are the expert, you are here, you're bringing you on. And there's someone that I work with, or someone that I'm friends with in Seattle, and he has that kind of same white glove service where it's like, here's the keys. I'm guessing. So does that why you probably sell homes for more is because they hand over the keys and you take care of everything afterwards, like the painting, you decide what's worth doing, what's not worth doing, and all that prep, I'm sure gets you front load the work and then that makes the marketing a little easier.
I think it's a lot of things. Like you can't market something ugly. I mean,
Yeah.
you can, but no one's going to look at it, right? So I always tell people like it starts with a canvas, right? If I don't have a good canvas to work with, it doesn't matter if I spend 10,000 or $20,000 on marketing, like, like the first impression that somebody has is online. So it's all about how it's staged, prepped, all of that. So I think we are very, very good at that phase. I think a lot of realtors, because they don't have the team support, they really veer away. Like they might really know that it would do better if the countertops were replaced and the floors were refinished and the backyard was redone and all the lights were changed. But they're like, they don't have the capability to do that. Like I actually am down a listing coordinator right now, and for the first time in 6 years, I am doing that myself. And oh my God, I'm like, oh, it's actually been really fun because I've been able to get back into my systems, but I'm like, oh, this is a lot of work. So it's staying on top of those vendors, like, it's a ton of work. And
Project
so there's just
management.
no way, yes, there's no way I could do that if it was like just me. I could only sell like one or two homes a month, like it just, there's not enough time. So I think, yes, it comes from that, but also I think it comes from negotiation, right? Like we're really good at negotiating, and that comes from practice and work and like knowing what to anticipate and like how not to scare people off and how to do the right negotiations and make people feel special in the negotiations. And some of that came from failure, right? Like, well, that didn't work. We'll cross that strategy off the list. I never want to do that again, right? It's like you just learn. And so it's like you have to have those at bats in order to learn. And there's not a one size fits all for every house. Like, so there's just a lot of different ways to negotiate something. And I love to negotiate. Um, I think that like I have sellers all the time. Like I had a listing earlier this spring, and it was the first time in my career this ever happened. One of my buyers wanted to write on my listing, which I don't do. I don't double end deals. I tell buyers that like up front. So I referred them to an agent on my team. I also was like very nervous because my reputation is another reason why we're really good on the buy side. People like really trust me. They want to work with me. And I didn't want to be seen as like an agent who was like trying to serve themselves or let something. So I told everybody who was writing, we had 10 offers on the place or seven or something. I told everybody who was writing, one of my buyers is writing on this. Please send the offers to my manager. I'm not even going to look at them. She put them in a blind spreadsheet for me. And then I got on the phone with the seller with the blind spreadsheet. She was on the call, but I could tell exactly who my buyer was. And I could all actually tell who, like, out of the seven offers I think we got, I could tell who five of them were because I knew too much. Like it's like I know how I trained somebody to write an offer, and it was written perfectly. So I'm like, okay, well, yeah, this is not from my team. And then, I know, oh, this agent's like a little sloppy. Like I know exactly who that is. Like, so it ended up not really being blind. And I just told my clients, I was like, actually, I can tell who's the client, but it was the top offer. And it was the top offer by $200,000.
Wow.
And I said, what do you want to do? And they said, well, we think we should sign it. And I was like, I disagree. I was like, what if if I can, secure this and you feel safe and, we don't touch this offer. And then we like give all of these other people the opportunity to beat that offer. And they're like, well, we're really nervous. And I'm like, well, what's there to be nervous about? Worst case scenario, you get the top offer, which is way higher than you ever expected, and you're super happy with it. But what if you can get more? And so we called through the six other offers, we being me, called through the six other offers. They said, the top offer is, I think it was $3.3 million. dollars. You have 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Do you want to beat the offer or not? Like, you get one shot. One of the buyers came up $400,000 higher than they initially wrote at, which who would ever have thought that somebody was going to come up that much? And
Yeah.
then to be fair, I told the sellers, like, to be fair, I think we should give these top people a shot, the last shot, because they came in at the highest. And so then those buyers had the opportunity to beat the top one. They chose not to. They were like, we're going to stay still. And so everybody got the opportunity to win, knowing what the mark was to win, and that house sold like $400,000 higher than my client ever thought possible to a buyer that wasn't mine, even though I could have gotten paid on it twice very easily just by steering that conversation. They would have been so happy with that offer. But like, I mean, that wasn't fun, right?
Yeah.
And my buyer, I called him the next day. I was like, how do you feel? Like, do you feel like things were fair? And they said, well, they actually had a ton of regret about not buying the home, but they were like, we feel like it was fair. So,
Interesting. So every agent says they're a great negotiator, and I'm sure that kind of puts you on a. You probably get a little chuckle. You're like, oh yeah, everyone says they're great. Like, what separates an average versus an excellent negotiator?
I think a lot of it is experience, right? It's just like knowing what could go wrong so you don't like say the wrong things. And like no and like having worked both sides, like I think a lot of times when people get big in their career, they just work the listing side and they forget what buyers feel like. And it's really important to know what buyers feel like in a negotiation because a lot of times they get pissed and they can just like totally back off. Right. So I think that understanding and being actively engaged in both sides is going to make for a better negotiator. And, I think you kind of got to love it. And I think most people, quite frankly, are really scared of it. They're scared of the fear of loss. And so like it's like really understanding the strategies for like understanding the plan Bs and that sort of thing. And like that only comes with experience. Um, so I think most agents are lousy negotiators. Um, I think they want to get the deal done as quickly as possible and get paid and move on. Um, but like, because I see it, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
on, I'm like, wow, like I actually am closing a deal. I'm in the midst of closing something right now. And I mean, two of the things that I closed in the last 30 days, my buyer clients would have paid substantially more. And they were the only offers on the homes. We came in very, very, very low, very aggressively. And, the agents just botched it on the other side. And I mean, we're thrilled, but like just completely botched it.
Hmm. That's interesting. So there's a lot of ways we can go with this because you're skilled at a lot of things, and there's a lot of things I would love to talk about. But there's two things that are kind of on my mind. One, you talk about your team, and I think that your process and everything is a huge key to your success. And I heard something crazy, not crazy, but it might sound crazy to some people, is I think your payroll was something like $86,000 a month or something. I don't know if that number is right or wrong. Um,
That sounds about right. I mean, my overhead is like I think it's like $130,000 a month. Yeah.
so there's that.
And a lot of that is payroll. Yeah.
So you have a great structure and team and support underneath, which I think is a key to success. But I'm interested to hear your point because I heard you don't like cold prospecting, which I don't really love it.
You really did
um,
your research. I'm impressed. You know all the dirt on me.
you're you're really good at like strategic gifting, corporate accounts, SEO, content marketing. So when you kind of look at that divide and you look at like your business, and if I just asked you like what do you think was like your key to success and like the things that you did, there's obviously a lot of pieces that have gone into it. Which side do you kind of lean towards? And let's kind of dive down that.
Okay. Yes, I'm a terrible prospector. So it's definitely not that. Um, so I think, I mean, definitely the team and like leverage has been huge. And, you hear that $130,000 number. It didn't always start out that way. And I think,
Yep.
if you're netting $40,000 a month, you shouldn't be spending $130,000 on your business. That would be really stupid, right?
Yep.
But what I did, and like no one ever told me this, I just like I just decided it was what felt safe to me, is that I would invest 50% of what I make, what I take home, what I net per year on the team, marketing, whatever. So I plan, I mean, a 50% gross business in any other industry is phenomenal. Most
Yeah.
industries are like 15%,
15%.
right? And you
Yep.
talk to these agents all the time and they're like net is like 90%, and I'm like, and they wonder why they're not growing. It's like, well, you're not like investing in yourself. And, I'm a huge investor. I have multiple investment properties. I'm big into the stock market, like all of these things. But if we looked at like the investments that I've put into stock or housing or any of these things and compared it to the investment and the return of investment that I've put into my business has hands down been the best investment of my life, you know? So, like, I believe in myself, right? It's not to say that I'm only going to invest in myself. I also believe in diversification because I'm not an idiot. So I think that, just like, it's like I have, I mean, I have a bookkeeper and all that stuff, but I drive her crazy because I'm like, hey, can you drop all this stuff into this very rudimentary spreadsheet that I can take a look at the end of every year? And I just the way my brain worked from the very beginning. And I want to see, like, for the categories that I've created, exactly what did I spend? And I could go back and look at that over the last 10 years and like decide, okay, and was this a good return? Do I want to continue investing in that next year, or do I want to increase the investment? And then what are some additional areas, assuming there's money left over, that I want to invest in? And what I would do is I wouldn't just, so if I sold, 100 million 1 year, I'm going to project like a 20% increase. That's a conservative increase. I usually have been able to do that. So I'm going to make my investments on the projection, not the last year's. So I'm additionally going to invest for the next year because I'm planning to do that. And in most cases, I have done that or exceeded that. Some years have been like the same, but then the next year has been like 40%, right? So it's really worked out well for me. Um, I will say I have an unfair advantage to some people that I have a husband with a stable income, and that has allowed me to like not, in most cases, there was a 3-year stint where he had a startup. That was hard. Um, but in most cases, that's allowed me to be like, okay, my bills at home are taken care of. This is like, the worst
Mm.
case, I make no money this year. And there's been many years where I'm like, I'm not going to make a dime this year. It's never happened. It's never happened. But there's been many times that I've thought that, based on the investments that I was making, is just like, I'm not going to make any money. Like, this is crazy. Um, but it never has worked out that way. So I do think that the investments that I've made, and the like whatever 1.5, $1.7 million that I'm spending on the business right now per year, like, yes, it takes money to make money, right? But, like, in terms of the agents and what they're netting and what they're taking home, I think there's very few in the country that are netting what I'm netting, like, because they're not spending it, and or they're overspending, and they're really not making anything. So it looks like they are making all of this money, but in fact, they're not making money at all in some cases.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's the bottom line that matters. So
That's
I'm
right.
curious, what are some of the best investments that you've made in your business?
Well, I would say, as you mentioned, I do have really good SEO, and you know, the web has been something that, like, from the very beginning, I remember like talking to people about like Yelp and stuff, like early in my career. They're like, who would find a realtor on Yelp? Like, we get a lot of business from Yelp. Um, so like like I really saw like, and I still do, a very big missing link in like the investment of like online websites for realtors. Um, and I actually love marketing. I have a background in marketing. It just really gets me going, like it makes me really excited. So I think it's been an easy place for me to like, like I tell my team sometimes, like we're a marketing company that sells real estate, right? So I think if you think about it that way, like most agents don't know how to market their listings and they sure as hell don't know how to market themselves. And so I think that the investments that we've made, they're expensive, right? Like doing video, like I think last year we spent 60 or $70,000 on video, right? And like, my website probably cost me 60 or $70,000 a year based on the people that are working on it and the things that we're reworking. But we get like 40% of our business online. And it's not like I don't buy Zillow leads and that kind of
Yep.
stuff. Like it's people who are searching for an agent and they're coming. Like we had an interview yesterday and I said, how did you find us? And she goes, well, I think I met you at an open house like 3 years ago. And she's like, but then, so this goes to the team, right? She's like, so then I was like on your newsletter. The newsletter was really good. But she's like, but then, we got onto your website and it has just like such a tremendous amount of buyer education. And, when we go on other realtors' websites, like there's nothing there. And you guys really seem like you know what you're doing. We hear that kind of stuff every day. And so I do think investing, I mean, it's a long game, right? I think everybody
Yep.
wants, like, how can I just spend $5,000 a month and like turn on the lead spigot? That's never going to happen with a website. Like, it's going to, like you're going to spend, tens of thousands of dollars and you may not see stuff from it for a few years. I mean, the YouTube stuff that we're investing in right now, like I'm spending, probably all in all, like over $100,000 by the time it's all done. And I'm not seeing a ton from it, but I'm going to. So watch out for me on YouTube. Like we're really gonna we're hitting that hard. So, but
Nice.
I believe in investing for the future and putting in the work and being patient. And I think that that has really, really played out for me really well.
Okay. That's awesome. Yeah, like the website SEO, like your newsletter, like it's kind of like planting a seed and you're kind of watching it grow over time, kind of like the same thing as YouTube, which is why I'm sure you're okay with it. You're like, I've seen this happen more than once, this story. So now you're just
Right.
seeing it through.
And you're looking at people like Ken, right? It's like if I have somebody like, so I look at what Ken Posick's doing and I'm like, okay, the guy closed like over $100 million last year off leads that he's attributing to YouTube. Like that. And when you talk to him about his attribution, the only thing that he's attributing it to is people who responded at like hello at Ken Posick or whatever is the email that he used. There would be way more than that because a lot of people who are seeing his YouTube are going to end up coming in from other channels, but he's
Yep.
only attributing people who reach out to the email that he says in those videos. So if I had to guess, it's double that number. Um, so if I see like a clear path to success, I can get behind that in a hot minute, right? Because I'm just like, okay, like, I mean, Ken, he seems great, but like, it's like, I should be able to do that. Like, whatever he can do, like, I can do too, right? So it's just all figure outable. And then it's just putting the time in, right?
Yep.
So,
And putting the time in, finding the right mentors, and it seems like so. I was going to ask you, like, where are you kind of investing now for the future? Because the market's really tight, and I'm sure San Francisco is probably not like super easy, just like every other market. So is it YouTube? Is that where you're putting your investments?
so yeah, we are definitely putting money into YouTube, not into like ads or anything like that, just because
Yeah.
Ken's not. So I'm not either. I'm just following his template. um, Plus, we tried it a little bit. Actually, I had a coach that really pushed me on ads, and so we dropped some like tens of thousands of dollars into it early on. We didn't see anything for that. Um, so yes, YouTube is an additional thing. Um, early in July, like July when the market started shifting, I took a look at my P&L and L and I was freaked out. Like I was like, oh my God, am I going to be able to keep the doors open? Like, how long is this going to take? Like, businesses are going to go under. And like, I was literally like telling my husband, like, we need to cancel Netflix. Like, that's $9.99, you know? Like, I was just like, I was looking at everything, like those subscriptions on your phone that are $2.99. Like, my financial advisor was like, can I have access to your LastPass? I was like, no, that's $1.99. Like, what else can I get you? Like, not gonna happen. um, so, I like looked at that and I ended up like pulling back on gifting. I pulled back in like
Mm,
several areas because I was freaked out for about 3 or 4 months. And then I caught my breath and I was like, okay, this is going to be fine. And I turned it, not all of it back on. Some of it I left off. Like we had this like Ruby app where they answered the phone for us. We kept that off. There's some things that we kept off. We like scaled down our gifting a bit. Like we were like, okay, does it matter if you get like an $80 box of chocolate or like is a $20 box of chocolate? Does it have the same effect? And we decided that it did. So
mm,
we cut some things back, but kept them there. Um, and then I had scaled back on video a bit. I was like, oh, we can't do this much video. It's like very expensive. We've turned that all back on. So I mean, I'd say to answer your question, like we're continuing to invest. We're continuing to invest in YouTube. The most expensive part of YouTube is me, because it's requiring me to, in order to invest in it the way that I plan to invest in it over the next 12 months, it means that I need to do less sales, which is really expensive, right?
yeah.
Because the profitability for the company comes from the sales that like I close by myself, right? Clearly, I have to pay a buyer's agent or a listing agent more than what I pay myself. Um, but I've decided that, I'm moving into a phase of my life where I have everything I need. There's literally not one single thing I want. And I want to let the other people on my team grow and like let them be in the spotlight. And I want to be like a real CEO and a creative visionary. And so,
Mm,
and I also want to spend like a little bit more time with my kids. Um, I have 5 years left before they go to college. And I feel like if there is anything that I could ever regret in life, it would probably be that I didn't spend enough time with them. I mean, I spent most of their lives working 70, 80-hour weeks. And so I am like really committed to like scaling out of sales because that's the part of the business and the time that's very uncontrollable. And also I think I can really make the business grow by getting really focused on the creative and the marketing aspect of the business even more than we ever have been. So that is where, like, that is I would say the biggest investment for the next 12 months is me shifting my time and my money out of myself and putting it into another section of the team where I will personally make less money, but the team has the same conversion rate as I do. They are as good as me. I fully believe in them. And like, they're going to be like, I'm going to continue to be in like 12 to 15 sales a year, but I'm not like last year, I closed 60 myself. Like, I won't be doing that going forward. If I ever want to go
mm,
back to that, it'll always be there, right? Like, that to me, that's the thing. If you're choosing a risky path, it is risky. Um, to me, it always is important to have a plan B. I mean, luckily it's my business. So if I suddenly say like, well, guys, just joking, I want to go back to selling that many houses again, like, then that's what's going to happen. But I'm very committed to not doing that.
nice. So what you're doing is you're taking the step backwards to slow down to focus on marketing so you could speed up ultimately to move yourself out of the business. And that goes into like, when did you realize that you already had enough and spending time with family was important? Because as a business owner, it's a very hard like battle between the two. Like you said, you work 70 to 80 hours a week for several years, but then there's the family side too, which you attribute hiring an executive assistant as like a huge time to be able to spend way more quality time with your family. I'm just thinking through that as like someone who's younger, someone who's kind of gonna be going through those phases as well. Like, how do you kind of, I don't want to say balance, but like integrate the two?
So I read a book. Well, I listened. Actually, I started reading the book. Believe it or not, I actually got like halfway through the book and then finished off on audio. It's not very well written, but it changed my life. I listened slash read it. I think over Christmas, I want to say. Um, and I would have put it down, but it was given to me by a very close friend who I really respect. And shoot, what was the name of it? It was like this name that's like you you're like it came in the mail and my husband's like, "Did you order this?" I'm like, "Hell no, I would never order that." Like, um
What's it about?
I gotta I gotta tell you. It's about um it's called Die with Nothing.
Oh, I've actually heard that.
Um
Bill Perkins, I think, is the name.
Bill Perkins, yeah. Um so um like I'm like, yeah, who like why would I want to die with nothing? That's the dumbest thing I ever heard. Like that sounds like a really bad idea. So I would never have picked it up or bought it or read it if it wasn't like given to me by somebody really who I would really like respect. So my husband and I both read it. And um, I so it just like made me realize that first of all, like one of the things he talks about is that like most people die with like a lot of money. I mean, like not most people. That's not correct. But like most people like me die with a lot of money. They have more than they need. They're over saving. And they're planning for like the absolutely worst case. And like one of the things that he was saying is that like actually you spend a lot less money as you get older, right? Like and the kinds of things that you want to do when you're 20 are different than the kinds of things that you want to do when you're 30. For example, when I was 20, I traveled around in hostels and like, you know, I would never travel that way now. But when I was 20, I thought it was amazing. It was one of the best experiences I ever did. And I'm so glad that I put that on a credit card and like paid it off over time. And that was a really good financial decision for me, even though it didn't probably seem like it at the time. But it made me who I was. It changed my life. I probably would have never moved to San Francisco if I hadn't done that. Like it was like really important experience. So he's saying like if you're delaying all these experiences, like by the time you're 60, like whenever you're suddenly ready to like live life, a lot of times people are sick or their bodies don't work as well, or it's like like and he's not saying necessarily die with nothing, but he's just saying like enjoy your life and understand that if you die with an extra $1 million or $20 million, but like anything extra, those are all years, those are all experiences that you traded for that money. You had to work really hard for that money. And like, was there maybe something else that you could have been doing instead of working hard for that money that you didn't even need? And, also just like, like people are like, well, what about your kids? Like, he's not saying like, don't take care of your kids, but he's saying, if you want to do something for your kids, like do it now. Like, why wait till you're dead? Like buy them a house, like whatever, like, or like buy something for your parents. Like they're going to be dead when you're like ready to spend money. Like, buy them a car, like buy things for them now. Like, so I just think like, I think my husband and I were both like very hyper focused on like, when we get to this number, then we'll have more than we need. And then we can like do whatever we want. Not like, to be clear, I love to work. It's like, I
Yeah.
don't ever see like not working, but it was just, like the idea of like work like you don't need the money like it's very real when you reach this like number. But like actually in talking to my financial planners and stuff after reading this, like the number that they've like set up, like it's so ridiculously like I don't need it like that number. And in fact, we've moved that goalpost multiple times. And so it's just like actually I really have what I need now. And I don't see a world in which that's ever going to change. Thank God. Like I'm very fortunate. Like even if I'm making a lot less money, like it's all gonna be fine because I'm not trying to retire right this second. And so like I'm gonna live a little bit more and I'm not gonna like why would I want to do that they're like, oh, you can retire in 4 years with more money than you need. And I'm like, but I don't even want to retire in 4 years. So it's like why not stretch out like that time and just enjoy life a little bit more and try to slow it down instead of hurrying up to get to this place that as soon as you're going to get there, you're probably going to feel really empty and like you have no purpose, right? So it's like, and then my kids are in college, and it's like, okay, I worked so hard to get to this place that I don't even want to be because I don't want to retire. So why did I do that? So it just like really made me like rethink that whole thing.
That's awesome. So I want to commend you as an amazing leader, as someone who thinks differently, building differently. So I wanted to ask you, through all of that you've learned, everyone that you've mentored under, everything that you look at, what to you is an amazing leader? And not just in business, but just in life in general.
I would say I would say somebody who truly cares about other people's growth and not their own. And this is something that I'm like only maturing into. Like honestly, like I wouldn't say that that came naturally to me early in my career. Like it is now becoming something that like, it's almost like the second phase of life, right? That I genuinely care about. I think a lot, like early in my career, it was really more about me than it was about anyone else. And, you know, like actually Carrie, like I wouldn't, like, I think one of the things about Carrie that makes her special is like she has this like genuine, like, I've known Carrie for a long time. And she feel like I've seen her in situations where somebody's coming up to her and they're like, say like an $8 million agent. And they're like asking her questions. And like early in my career, like when I'm there with Carrie, I'm like, why the hell are we talking to this person? Like, we have world problems to solve here and they do not involve this $8 million agent. But she would be like, oh yeah, and like genuinely curious about what she could learn from that person. Like genuinely. It's like really admirable. Like that you can learn something from anyone and like really like taking the time to figure out like what can I teach this person and what can this person teach me? There's like no bad conversations, right? So, I mean, I think that that piece is a little hard to like put your finger on, but I think generally it's about caring to develop others. And for me, that will never be about developing everyone. Like you got to earn it. I'm not going to try to develop. Like I don't want to like coach a bunch of people who aren't really that motivated. Like it's like I want to work with the best. And so to be on my team, you got to be on the best. You got to be the best, and then that's the people who I want to spend my time on. Like I don't want to have the conversations every week. That's like, well, this is what we talked about last week, and you like still didn't do anything. Like yawn, like that's a waste of my time. So I think that makes a really good leader, and that's something I strive to be. That I'm not all the way there as much, but I can see it, and I plan to be. Um, and I think for me, like one thing that makes me a good leader is my openness, that I don't see that a lot in other people. And I feel like that's been a huge attribution to like the success of my team is that I don't have fear around somebody stealing something of mine and like going to implement it somewhere else. And like, I don't have any of that baggage for some reason. And so it's allowed me to like be very, very sharing with others and like and that's allowed them to grow and that's allowed me to grow. So it's been like very, very, very beneficial. And lastly, what makes a really good leader that I also like could do better at is implementation. Um, and I've seen, I like have put myself in very big coaching rooms and I've been in coaching rooms with people where we've been taught this thing and like everybody's fired up about it. Like, oh, I'm taking massive notes and blah, blah, blah. And then I go home and I get busy and then I come back 6 months later and like Carrie will be the person who's like, yeah, I just like put that thing into place and like I made an extra $1 million in the last 6 months. Like just implement like immediately. And like I try to do that, but I could do so much better at the implementation piece than I do. And I've seen other people do it and grow as a result. So I think like good leaders are really good implementers and like good at holding people accountable. And I'd say I'm like so at that. Like I don't really like to hold people accountable, but as I'm moving into this more CEO thing, I do have more time now to track the conversations that we had and make sure there's plans and like, and I'm finding that I'm really enjoying that. And I find that my team is really enjoying it because like somebody who's really good, they do want to be held accountable, because
Yep.
they want to get better. So
That's awesome. Well, I want to say thank you for joining and just being an amazing leader, leading by example, and also just doing things differently in a way better way in the industry.
yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the compliments. I really appreciate it. And I really enjoyed our conversation.